now we'll sort of program that bouncing pattern. First off, we gotta add some things to the room. Type down alarm 0 equals, I'm gonna put down 1, but it's possible that if your computer's a little slower than mine, then you might need to put down 2 or 4. And the next thing we need to set, create a new variable called x1 equals x, and y1 equals y. Okay. So this is to represent where the ball started at, because it's going to need to reset there in the beginning, and we need to make sure there's a variable to show where it was in the beginning. Okay. So now it's going to alarm 0. In here we gotta check whether the mouse is moving, which will then create the reaction, let's say. This is a rather long code, and my typing skills still aren't that great because I changed my keyboard, so I'm going to copy this and then I'll explain it. So what this is saying is the absolute value of mouse x1 minus mouse x. I forgot to add the x1 value in the creation, but I'll do that in a second. X1 is basically the previous x value of the mouse, and the mouse x is the current x value. So if there's a difference in these numbers, then that would mean it moved. And we do the absolute values so that we can check whether it's more than 0. And we put or, and then we have the same process for y. Do this because if you were to move your mouse straight up, then this wouldn't react, or if you move it exactly horizontal, this one wouldn't react. So we have them both to make sure if it moves at all, one of them will pick it up. Then we have this variable called recover. You can think of it as the radius around the mouse. I chose recover because it's basically the recovery rate. The smaller the value is, the more recovered the balls are. I also need to add this variable to the creation. We'll do that in a second. Right. Next, type down if recover more than 20, recover minus equals 2. Else, so if recover is less than 20, we want recover to equal 0. Alright, so the reason we do more than 20 rather than more than 0 is because if we have it recover be like 10, so this is radius from the mouse, the balls have like this, will have this bouncing effect, will go back and forth, and as it gets closer, the speed that gets bounced back decreases. So if we have a value like 1, or really anywhere under 20, to get all these small bounces, it'll shake a lot, and we don't want that effect. So that's why we did like this. Next, we got to reset all our values to make sure that this looping thing works. So first off, alarm 0 equals 1. If you chose to make this 2, then this will need to be double as much because it's happening less. Mouse underscore x1 equals mouse x. Now let's copy this to reset the mouse y. Replace the x's with y's, and that's it. Okay. Now let's add the mouse x1 and the recover and the mouse xy variables to the creation event quickly. There we go, that's added, and we want recover to equal, it really doesn't matter since it'll be checked almost immediately with the alarm 0 equaling 1, but we'll see. Now let's go into the step event. Alright, this part's a little hard to follow. It took me a while to figure out a good system. Before this I made a different tutorial, which I never uploaded, but with the system that really wasn't as efficient. But now it's a little bit longer, but it's more efficient and more easy to understand. So I'm going to add notes to make sure you follow. The first code we're going to be adding is designed to accelerate at start. So this is, we want to move away from the mouse as quickly as possible when the recover value is more than 0. Then after that, we're going to add another code, which is going to be decelerate recover. So when it's far enough away from the mouse, it'll start slowing down, and maybe even come back a little bit. Next step, move back to x1, y1. So once it's reached a very low speed from decelerating, it'll start moving back towards its original spot, which is at x1, y1. Next is accelerate to x1, y1. Pretty straightforward, just gain speed as it goes back. Next step is bounce back. If the speed pushes it back within a radius of the mouse where it's not supposed to be, then this will push it back. It'll loop back towards this part. So these four lines could be happening over and over again until recover gets low enough that it'd be able to go all the way back to x1. Now next step, once that looping is done, it looks like the ball's confused because it's on the spot, but it keeps trying to move towards it. So what the effect is really just starts really shaking a lot while it's there, and this is to make sure it doesn't happen. So next thing, this really isn't part of it, but we don't want it to go too fast. Like a lot of times when you add unlimited acceleration to something, it goes so extremely fast that you can't see it, and then that just looks ridiculous. So call this part control. This won't do anything more than make sure that there's max speed. Alright, now the first part. These codes are rather long, so I'll be copying them. Okay, I'll explain this. If recover does not equal 0, I put that down because you don't want to move away from the point if recover equals 0. You want to stay there. And next, if distance point mouse x mouse y is less than recover times 1.5. This is checking how close it is to the mouse. If recover is higher, then it can be farther away from the mouse and still react. That 1.5 is just a constant I added for it to look the way I wanted it to. We'll be using recover more often now. I just add constants to make it look right. Okay. And status equals 2. Status is a variable that I forgot to add, but status is basically the saying which stage you're in. I think I said status equals 2 is where you're completely reset. Status equals 0 is where you're moving out, and status equals 1 is where you're trying to get back. So then speed equals recover over 5. So the higher recovery is the faster your speed away from the mouse is. And direction equals point direction x y mouse x mouse y plus 90 plus random 180. Okay. This code, if direction was set to that one, then you'd go straight towards the mouse. So the thing is, what you would do is add 180 to make it go in the other direction. But I also want the direction to be slightly randomized. So if I do 90 plus 180, it'll go anywhere between 90 and 270, which is 90 degrees from 180 in both directions. Okay. And status equals 0. I explained that already. It's just to make sure everything goes smooth. Alright, next code. Distance to point mouse x, mouse y is more than recover 1.5. This is showing that it's beyond the recover thing. This code is saying it's inside. This one is saying you've passed through it. And I didn't add this one because if you're beyond the recover, then obviously recover doesn't equal 0 because you just got out of there. And status equals 0. I don't want it to try and go through this process if it's supposed to be reset. So that's why status check is there. This is the point x1. That's basically saying make sure that you're not too close to the place where you want to be at. Then speed equals minus equals 2. So that's a deceleration. So move back. Okay. If speed is less than 5, so basically what that checking is whether this has slowed down this speed to the point where it's less than 5. And that's when you want to start moving back. This is the point x1. This I put is the same code as here. And status equals 0, so you're moving away from the recovery. Okay, then set status equal to 1, which is where you're moving back. and direction to point direction x, y, x1, y1. So you're moving towards the point where it started. Okay. Accelerate to. Okay. If status equals 1, which is saying that you're heading back, then speed plus equals 2, accelerating. And direction equals point direction x1, y1. This code probably wasn't necessary because it's already changed here, and there's nothing else to make it change. So it's probably just extraneous, but we'll just leave it there. Okay. Bounce back. So it's moving back towards the place where it wants to be, and it came within the radius again, so it's pushed out. Okay. If this is point mouse x mouse y, this is basically checking whether it's within the radius. It's exactly the same code that we used here at the start. And status equals 1, which shows that it's going back. Direction equals point direction x1. Okay. This code here is similar to this one. It's having it move away, only instead of being 90 degrees off 180, I made it 30 degrees off 180 in both directions. So yeah, a little randomness always looks cool. Okay. Status equals 0, which would move it back to the stage that it's moving away from the place where it wants to be. Okay. So if speed is more than 50, then recover is divided by 5, or otherwise speed will equal 10. That way it'll always go back at a reasonable speed. Okay. Now the reset command. Okay. This will reset it to where it was in the beginning. Another precaution to make sure it doesn't shift around too much when it's supposed to be stopped. Okay. Type down if status equals 1, which means that's going back, and if distance to point x1, y1 is less than 5, or distance to point x1, y1 equals 5, this equals 5 is basically supposed to counteract with this code that I've used a few times now, because then if x equals 5, if I didn't put this part down, then you'd have some situation where x equals 5 and it'll just stop right there because it had no idea what to do. Speed equals 0, move it all, and it's reset to its original values, and status equals 2, which means it's reset. Now the control thing, which is a pretty simple one. If speed is more than 20 and status equals 1, speed equals 20. This is basically saying that if you exceed 20, then go to 20, but you have to be moving back towards it. So in the beginning it should be completely reset, so have status equal 2. Okay, now it should work. Right, there you go. Moves away, and it comes back pretty well. And if I stay still, it bounces. See? And it's completely still when that happens. Alright. Took me a while to get this code to work fine, and once you get it right, it feels really satisfying just to mess around with it like this. And it all comes back together. There you go. This is the end of the tutorial, but one thing I want to highlight is that me and my brother basically drew out, traced a background of a picture, and yeah, it's going really slow right now because I made that alarm equals 1 thing, and I wasn't very smart, but that's why I did it. Okay, so here it comes. I've also made the balls about a quarter the size that they were normally. Alright, guess what it is? There you go. Seems like my screen size didn't change very much, so you can't see the whole thing, but you should be able to see enough of it. If you're a major Final Fantasy fan, maybe you'll be able to tell that it's Cloud, or maybe it's just that it came out so horribly that you can't even recognize it. But yes, that's Cloud from Final Fantasy 7, and I think it looks pretty cool. So that's the end of the tutorial. Thank you guys for watching. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and comment. If you have any questions, please feel free to PM my YouTube channel or leave a comment with a question. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next tutorial.